All right, what's up YouTube? I hope everyone can hear me. Welcome to another weekly stream of Startup University, which is a format we established at ACTA internally to once a week get together and discuss foundational knowledge and wisdom even around what it takes to create a successful startups. In the past few weeks, we talked about a lot of the foundational elements of what it really looks like to build a startup, also the common mistakes founders tend to make. And today we want to talk about a bit of a different lesson, which I call the vision reality gap. Because as founders, I think we know the story quite personally well, that oftentimes we have this vision we want to build towards, but there's always a gap, right? And I want to talk a bit more how I deal with that personally, as you're creating something but it's not fully there yet, and how you navigate that. Before we jump into the lesson for today, how are you guys feeling? What are the vibes here in Cape Town for the team? Any volunteers? Okay, Justus, thumbs up.
That's great, man. Love it. ACTA University. Great to see that one of the last university streams got over 2K views, I guess. So glad to share some knowledge. Excited for today. Woo!
It's finally Monday again. We're excited.
Joe's still tired.
Okay. Then how about we jump straight into the lesson? Also, guys, we can actually just discuss. Again, this is sort of like an internal meeting. We're just live streaming, so don't worry too much about the cameras and so forth. So let me read out to you a small essay I wrote this morning around the vision reality gap. And afterwards, I would ask all of you to actually discuss it, right? I want to get into it with you to understand the way this lives in your life, how you deal with it, or some new insights you get there. Okay, so I realized an interesting concept while building my new company, ACTA, that I call the vision reality gap. And I think it extends more broadly to creative work, which I define as bringing something that doesn't exist yet into existence. It all starts with a spark, an inspiration for something that could be, but doesn't exist yet. A problem you believe that can be solved in a better way, a song that expresses a feeling you felt, a book you cannot not write, a video that may inspire just one person to do something differently. Whatever it is, once you have this insight or inspiration that leads you to create something new and then start acting, you will face the inevitable reality that the thing you created is not living up to the ideal you envisioned. There is a gap. After giving birth to the thing you imagined, you are confronted with it not being perfect. There are flaws. Things are not working yet. Decisions you made that turned out to be wrong. A gap between the ideal vision and reality you created. I'm feeling this right now with ACTA. We started building 3 companies, all serving a real need people have, with a clear vision of what it takes to solve each problem. But we're not making revenue yet. We are still in that pre-market fit time, working week after week on making the gap smaller. And part of me always questions whether I'm doing enough, whether we're working on the right things, whether anyone even cares. The voice is there every single day. There's almost physical pain I feel when the things I made are not living up to what they could be. And this is what drives my next action, the features I fix, the decisions I need to make. For a long time, and still to a fair degree today, I interpreted this gap as failure. I am the only one responsible for the gap. I could have made things better from the start, made different decisions, moved along the critical path the vision requires of me more strictly. This attribution of lack toward me, the creator, is what quickly snowballs into self-doubt, asking myself, do I have what it takes? This is also why criticism gets to me. Despite me wishing it wouldn't, critics hit a vulnerable spot, right between the courage it takes to go create something and the self-limiting part doubting yourself because of the vision reality gap. But I try to remember that critics rarely create something new. They stay in the safe zone, never putting themselves on the hook. This is also why negativity shouldn't have room in a startup. You need to see the gaps clearly, see what the market is telling you, but approach it with optimism about how you can pick the one path that works. If you cannot do this, you shouldn't be building a company. Interpreting the gap as a personal failure is wrong. The vision reality gap is inevitable. Although we romanticize the idea that we can one-shot creation, chances are we cannot. The nature beneath is iteration. It's the same as evolution. Something gets born, over many generations, nature adapts. Keeps the good stuff, removes the bad stuff, and nature doesn't stop. It's a cycle that repeats itself endlessly. But here's what I used to get wrong about the evolution metaphor. I thought it was aimless mutation. It's not. Evolution has direction toward a healthier, stronger, and more adapted species. Creative work is the same. With every iteration, you have the opportunity to discover what the direction you initially set out towards was wrong. And this is okay. This is what the pursuit of truth looks like. You don't just close the gap. Sometimes you realize the gap was pointing somewhere else entirely. So if you're a founder, musician, writer, creative, this is the heuristic you should operate from. Give birth to the vision that found you, see the gaps clearly, then work iteratively to close them, and stay open to discovering that your original direction needs to change. The difference between the one who succeeds at realizing their vision and the one who doesn't is that the one who does did not stop creating and iterating. This becomes a game of persistence in the long run. The cheesy line of simply don't give up becomes true with this evidence we just discussed and we find in Mother Nature. But how do you actually keep going when things haven't worked for weeks or months on end? For me, it's meditation. Writing about it, giving these thoughts space instead of suppressing them. Then looking at them as objectively as I can and returning to obsessing over closing the vision gap. That's what gets me going. I'm learning to make peace with the doubting part, to see what the market tells us for what it is and keep building from there. Maybe it's something else for you, but if you're serious about turning professional with your creative ambition, you need to find a good answer to the question, because the gap will always be there. The only choice is how you relate to it. Go create. Okay, this was my essay from the morning. Maybe just riffing off of that just for a few more moments. I think we all know this feeling, right? We have the idea of the initial version of Rio that we're building. We go about creating it and then we see, here and there it doesn't match yet what we both envisioned, for example. Same with Nova, the AI coaching app. We made a first version, we realized, there's still a gap between what we think it can enable for users and customers of the product versus what it actually delivered in the moment. Even with recruiting, with the most basic things, with videos probably even. Yeah, we have this idea, we execute, and then we see, man, these are all the things I could have done better. And the impulse also often is, with perfectionism, to not share it. Yeah? We could spend probably 4 weeks on just one short to get it really right with the vision that we imagined, never really shipping the thing. And I think this would not be the right answer to it, right? Saying, hey, we just don't ship, we don't bring it to the world because we let perfectionism get in the way. It's not the right thing because we're still here in the pursuit of truth. A startup, a product, or even content is a pursuit of truth, what people actually want. And the way you discover these answers is by actually sharing the work with the world, learning from it, and not letting this vision reality gap that is always there get too close to you. Because if you listen to this too closely, I think you can very easily get into this negative thought loop of self-doubt of, what it really takes and so forth. To add to that, the first startup I did when I started in university, it took us probably 3 years to land on something that actually works. And for 3 years, I, of course, also doubted myself a bit. Yeah, we didn't see real good results in the sense of, this is working. It was just hitting our head against the wall again and again. But we just kept building. And eventually we landed on something that worked, which then felt amazing, right? So I think it's also important to not tie your self-worth to the fact that you need to hit it on the first try. Chances are you don't, but really treat it as nature, as a part of evolution, iteration. So yeah, a very personal piece came to mind this morning. I'm excited to hear what your initial resonances are. What is going on in your mind as you were considering this interpretation of the vision reality gap and so forth. So, wanna go?
I mean, my first reaction was when I saw the title. It was very similar to something I had written down once. It's just that I defined it a bit differently. I defined it as the gap between my taste and my abilities, kind of. And that I think is a very similar thing. And at some point, I think when I started out actually doing stuff and like showing it to the world, the only way that I got over it was by not comparing the two in the first place and seeing it as two completely different games with a different set of rules. There's one in your head, the things you can imagine, you're able to imagine, and like the way you can kind of think about them. And then what you can produce, those are like incomparable. Those are just different games. So I don't, judge myself for the work I actually put out with what I have in mind of what I could do. But at the end of the day, still it's kind of my job to, slowly close that gap, one iteration after another.
What comes up in my mind, and I'm curious whether you see it in a similar way, is you could even treat this then as a form of practice. So you have the ideal with taste, for example, a product design that you absolutely are in love with, where you say, wow, this is excellent work, but you acknowledge you're not there yet, you cannot create it to the same level yet, and then it becomes a game of practice. Just, honing your craft, becoming better at the skill, going at it again and again. And this is sort of the bar you set for yourself. Did I practice today? Did I actually improve in my skill or not? Does this resonate a bit, or?
Sort of, yeah. But I think that's also kind of what has been happening over the past 1.5 years or so, right? Like if I think about it, although you will never quite reach that, because then also the way you think about things also evolves, right? Yeah, but still.
Thanks.
I really love the approach of looking at it like a puzzle piece, you know, you have this vision in mind what it could look like, but then you throw out the pieces and then all of a sudden you see the gaps. And taking time to like spot those small gaps that are still not solved yet to get to the level where you want, and not just doubting everything just because you're not there yet, but really approach it in like an analytical way. I think it really helps, especially for us with content. I think if we really break it down to the smallest puzzle pieces, they're like just small details we could change that bring us there. And I think taking time to watch it like this and not doubting your entire life choices is really helpful. And I think I will look into that, what that could be for media. So great insight.
Maybe I just offer one or two thoughts on what you shared. I think this anecdote to a puzzle is not bad because it's actually good. Because building a company especially is a multi-variable problem. You know, it's not just this one thing like make a great landing page and then you got a running company. There's so many different variables which you need to get right, which can also be quite overwhelming, frankly, for a team or even for one person as a founder. And instead of like there's basically two perspectives you can take to this problem. The one where you're always just seeing the gaps and feeling bad about that and like doubting, or the other perspective where you exactly acknowledge it's a multi-variable game. One puzzle piece at a time you need to get right. And still you need to make progress every day, right? And a lot of small progress compounds a lot. If you just get 1% better a day, I think over a year it compounds to I think 27x or something like that. I don't know if the math is right. Something like that, but definitely to a significant gain. So yeah, it's just an additional thought on that. Cool. Other impulses, questions? How do you deal with this gap? Do you see the gap in your work or not?
I think we see it like all the time with like the products we're developing, and again I think it really also comes down to like taste, because like I think like, we all agree like you have to sort of iterate, you have to pivot, like there are tons of these like micro pivots in all of your workflows, because even if you plan something out for like a week or 2 weeks, like the next day like something's going to change and you have to rethink the whole thing again. But having like sort of developing this sort of like feeling of like, okay, like now I have to like try out something new, right? Maybe this technology isn't it, like maybe like we have to have like a different approach here and there, and like sort of allowing yourself to explore but like still like staying on track is like a really sort of hard like decision that you have to make, I guess. And also like I think it's like all down to like sort of finding this in between. Like you want to follow like your gut, obviously, right? You want to do like the things you feel like strongly about, but also like sort of be able to like pivot to things that like you might not feel comfortable with, like technologies you just hate, focusing on like things in distribution that you just like don't feel like doing, but might actually work out. I think that's really important, right? But yeah, that's also like one question I had towards you. Like, do you feel it's like literally just like down to taste, like figuring out like when to pivot and like at which like frequency, or do you feel like it's something you can like sort of like learn over time?
I'll answer the question a slightly different way, maybe, because while I was listening, so if you look at, let's say, Agent OS, so the product, the company we're building together, there's probably a long list of gaps we could make, like with 1,000, like say 100 items, 100 things where obviously there is a gap. And now the question comes, you know, what do you work on first? You need some sort of framework or internal process to prioritize which problem to tackle, in what order. And sequence really matters. If you pick the wrong things to close the gap towards, it can happen very quickly that a year goes by. You have not made meaningful progress towards your North Star, which is revenue, and all of a sudden you're out of money. So the sequence in which you do the things matters. Then the question becomes, so how do you decide what to work on? And there's not this simple heuristic, this formula you can apply, and this gives you now the best thing. To me, it always comes down to clear thinking in a way. And the way I think about stuff clearly is by writing about it. So for example, with Agent OS, I would be, okay, so what do we want to accomplish? We want to get the first 10K in revenue or the first 1,000 users. Then I break it down from there to reverse engineer. So what is needed for that? Well, we need to find a way to reach, let's say, 1,000 people, even with a product that would be in our target market. Okay, so how do we do this? Well, and then you can break it down more and more, and then I think it becomes more clear what the sequence is that you should be following. And there's no formula. But I think thinking about this and writing about this helps. The thing I also do is sometimes I contemplate across ACTA or some of the ventures what the gaps are or what I think I should be working on. And then I use a large language model, Claude sometimes, or ChatGPT, and say, hey, this is what I was thinking about. And then in the end I say, break it down into the fundamental components of this problem. And it actually gives interesting questions or frames back, that stimulate me in a way. I don't just take the answer from AI, but I use it to think more deeply about what the sequence should be. And this helps me to become a better thinker and thus make better decisions. So there's also, I think, a small trick or way that you can improve the sequencing, right? It's as if you were talking with another person through logically, what should happen next. The last thing I would add is when we talk about sequence and what to identify, it always starts, I think, with what is the main goal at the moment? What is the intention? Because then you can very easily spot whether the thing is bringing you closer to it or not. And if you're aimless, you're not really clear on what the intention right now is, either increasing the number of people who sign up or improving your retention or improving the activation or improving the conversion rate in a given cycle you're in, let's say a week or a few days, whatever the cycle is, then you cannot even evaluate it clearly. So always starting also with the intention, what do we even want to do right now and why do we want to do this, is also the starting point. But yeah, for me personally, I haven't found a framework or like exact process I can always follow. It's just actual messy time I spent in contemplating what the best moves are. And then at the end of it, I typically walk away with an action which I think is in the optimum. Knowing that probably it's not, like I cannot guarantee that I in every moment choose the optimal thing objectively looking at it to work on, but I'm approximating that, right? And the closer I get to it, that's also good enough for me. So yeah, some more thoughts on that.
I think I also have one last thing I want to add from my experience. Because if you look at the puzzle piece, the reality, the current state it is in, obviously one thing is to spot those gaps and like trying to figure out what could get there to build up your whole vision. But another thing that I realized in the past is when you really take your time to look at the reality, there are also puzzle pieces that shouldn't maybe be there if you want to work to vision. So not only asking yourself, what do I need to do, but also what do I not need to do, or what do I need to stop? Maybe there's a completely wrong approach. Maybe the design I built is shit, or this technique which I adopted over years does not fit into my vision. And I think this is also a big part to closing this reality vision gap.
I think it quite nicely goes again with this idea of addition and removal or subtraction. You need to sometimes add things or make things even better that exist, but also sometimes need to radically remove stuff that shouldn't be there in the first place. So I think we can always return to nature again also for the anecdote for this example. One more thing I struggled with, for example, in the last few weeks was working on too many things at once. Because we have 3 ventures, I really want to push into all of them. Then we have brand building, where we want to put out content for the personal brand I'm trying to build. Then there were new side projects I started with a few people, then I was recruiting and so forth. And very quickly I was spread too thin across too many things. And I try to remember, and I'm not that good at it yet, but I'm trying to get better, to focus on less but better things. Really think about what the essence is, the one thing that matters at the moment, and not jump too quickly across stuff the moment it gets hard. Because this is also at least a reaction I sometimes have. The moment I hit something that is hard or uncomfortable, oh yeah, there's something else I can do. And then I distract myself, with another action which, gives me maybe dopamine, which seems shiny. But the more correct or the more optimal decision would have been to actually stick with that because the intuition was right? This is also, I think, also a thing you should not miss. A concrete example, Rio, we started building last week and we were discussing some features to add. But Akshat pointed out, hey Luis, we don't have real users yet on the thing. I mean, it's still prototyping phase, we just had the first versions. Then last week I did in some, I think, 8 or 9 customer calls in 2 days basically. On Thursday we had a conversation. This morning I started the day with a meeting with one person for 1 hour where I onboarded him basically to Rio and discussed exactly how they think about it and so forth. my gut feel was like, oh no, I want to spend now this hour in the morning to really think nicely about the features we could do and so forth. But I think it was the right call to go with the uncomfortable thing and now talking for an hour to this person and really understanding what they need. These are, I think, some mini examples for that. Cool.
Okay, so since this is just an internal meeting where the camera is occasionally running, I have one solution that I just found by talking about this. I think we have, on the media side, we have this problem of like having content, having ideas, having scripts, and then executing on them. And I thought one puzzle piece that is missing, and I think Chris can agree on that, is having really nice footage at hand, like a B-roll gallery, because then all of a sudden you don't have to take the time and shoot. You can just push your idea and we find a solution to work around this. And I think this is one puzzle piece that for the media side needs to be fixed, and I will work on that this week.
My leadership coach, Matthias Müller-Lindenberg, always had this nice phrase, is this safe enough to try, or do you actually need to push more? And how I want to apply it there is, in the perfect world, in an ideal, we could have time every day to shoot for 3 hours content for me or whatever, or get the perfect shots. The reality is, we don't have that time. There's messiness that gets into our days and whatsoever. And yet, B-roll gallery, for example, that you arrange very nicely, could be safe enough to try, safe enough to work with for now, and you improve along the way. So again, you don't get perfectionism. You don't let it get in the way of the thing that you need to do in order to reach the goal. So yeah, maybe one more voice from either Akshat or Joe. Or both, if you both want to talk.
Well, generally I was observing. Thanks. It was really interesting insights. And I agreed to all of your statements as well. What I want to say is I think it's very important to have this gap of the ideal to what it actually is, because that's, I think, in the end the difference, at least to me, from a growth mindset to a, oh, okay, it is just what it is and we just accept it, right? So that goes, it could go into manifestation and seeing, okay, that's where I want to go. And obviously I'm not there yet, but there's a journey I can go. And as long as I have this North Star, I will reach it by internalizing it so deeply that you will reach it eventually. And obviously the way there, you can doubt yourself and you think, oh, okay, am I doing the right things? It's shit yet or whatever. Especially we have some people here who are very perfectionist about their work. So that can also be a voice in your head saying, hey, no, I shouldn't ship it yet, but that's exactly where you ship it. And then you improve along the way. And that's what I saw along the way here at Agda, really nice, with Nova being like constantly in the talks with customers. Now also real finally, after you doubted it again, even though that's one of your core statements, one of the core things you say, you doubted, hey, should I do this now? And then you did it and realized, oh, it's again the right thing to do. So yeah, having this gap is important, I would say.
Yeah, quick thing, also to break it down maybe practically to how we can integrate this into our days. Just a reflection practice of, at the end of the day, asking, what did I do today to close the gap? And reflect on it. Did I do something to close the gap from where I want to be, where my vision for myself, for the company, for the product is? And the things I did I get closer? And this is ultimately the test. Yeah, every day, small steps to close the gap. Well, I was listening to you, I was thinking Innova, maybe, I mean, I don't want to now turn this into a feature discussion, but sort of these reflective practices really work. You know, if you ask this question once a day, you prime your brain also, I think, to think clearer and clearer about, you know, getting into this habit, step by step, one small step at a time. So maybe we can actually do something around that where we have it in the daily check-ins in a way. Yeah.
I would say technically it's just another goal which you have set up, right? Like one suggestion I got from a lot of users is having multiple goals instead of just one, because you don't always, like sometimes you just don't make progress on this one goal, but you have other things like going to the gym or maybe doing a reflection like this. And it would kind of, you know, if we had like a multiple goal set up, that would be super useful, I think.
Yeah, and maybe also more formally some sort of, again, I think you can also break it down to habits even. Yeah? Like how do you spend your time in a day? What do you really do every single day? And if your habits or sort of the behaviors you caught up and, you know, are doing now frequently, maybe even without thinking about them explicitly, those behaviors are not serving you to close that gap, that's where you should start fixing it, right? Because you don't fix the vision reality gap by one day waking up inspired and now I'm going to fix my life. And then you do it for a day and then this was the end of the winter arc where you improve, yeah? It really comes down to those habits, and maybe there's even a component there, so maybe we talk about it later more. Actually, anything that's pressing that you want to also share? Or
Yeah, so like I agreed with most of the things you guys said and like pretty much covered all the bases. Yeah, one thing that I have learned this year or like recently is like it was very difficult for me generally to find that my vision or the product I'm building doesn't match the reality. When you ship it out, you put your heart and soul into it, and then people say, okay, I don't like it here. Then it's really difficult for you to get back up and start from scratch again, or maybe completely throw away the idea. Because yeah, it's like if you are not putting your love into it, you will maybe not make the best thing. But if you are putting your love into it, it will be difficult for you to get rejected. So like balancing those out and like thinking that's just part of the journey, and that just makes you better for the next thing you are gonna do. Yeah, that's something I've learned and like helped me a lot to move faster, or throw away the bad things which I already am seeing signs for. Yeah.
And what you mentioned nicely, there is basically two opposite tensions even, and there is like this tension field even. You need to balance and navigate it well, right? Because the one extreme or the other extreme doesn't work. So there's, as with so many things in life, it's all about integration and the balance and holding multiple, maybe even opposing things, but then still figuring out a way and so forth. So yeah. Yeah.
Especially for startups, maybe at a big place where you already know the product and you have validated it. It works if you're putting just love into it, into the engineering, but especially in a startup scene where we don't have product market fit yet, I think, we need to love our work, but not care if we hear that, okay, it wasn't the best thing, or maybe it's not something they wanted. To just like get over it very quickly, like a bad breakup or something, like, okay, that's gone, on to the next one, yeah.
Once. Yeah.
I think Reese, I don't know if he's still there, he said,
What up, Reese? Nice to see you again.
he said, I think also about being able to swallow your pride when you realize the initial idea isn't right. You must put the customer at the center and allow them to show you the right path. Goated comment.
Oh, but that's exactly right. Especially in startups, we can maybe narrow it down a bit and then slowly close the session for today. You're not in the game of just building from your own vision in isolation, like an artist might paint, and then say, yeah, this is going to be great. These rules may apply in culture or like in arts or in other pursuits, right? But you're here to find truth and serve a customer. That's all what it's about. So this is why you should also pick customers you actually are passionate about, people you enjoy being around with, because then it becomes natural for you to care. And I would even say the more a founder cares about the customers, matched with a skill they have, the better the product will be, the experience, the solution, the startup, the company, the bigger it will be. You can probably even map the level of the amount of people caring for the customer group and the size of the company you're building to a degree. Of course, there's many input variables, but it's a cool frame. Are there any other questions we got during the stream, or should we close it out here? Great. Then, for the ones who watched also in hindsight, thank you for watching. We try to get together every week to just discuss openly, what we learn, those important different knowledge pieces that I think helps all of us be a better founder, a better person in the startup environment. We're excited to welcome you back, hopefully next week, Monday, same time. And yeah, thanks guys, it was a good one. See you. Bye.